I discovered my husband has been pretending to go to work for 6 months. The truth about where he goes every day left me speechless. I, 34F, have always prided myself on having a stable marriage. We've been together for 8 years, married for 5. He, 36M, has always been the reliable type. Up at 6 a.m., out the door by 7, home by 6 p.m. The kind of consistency you build a life around. 6 months ago, he got a promotion. Nothing dramatic, same company, better position, slight pay increase. I was proud of him. He'd been working toward it for 2 years. The only change to our routine was that he started leaving earlier, 6:30 a.m. instead of 7, because of new responsibilities. I didn't think twice about it until last month when I was paying bills. His paycheck seemed off. Not dramatically less, just not what I expected with the promotion. I figured it was a mistake or maybe taxes had changed. I made a mental note to mention it, but forgot until 2 weeks later when I noticed the same thing. "Everything okay with your paycheck?" I asked casually over dinner. He barely looked up from his plate. "Yeah, why? Just seems a little low for the promotion." "Oh, that. The raise doesn't fully kick in until my probation period ends." He changed the subject to some show we'd been watching. It made sense. I forgot about it again until 3 days ago. I woke up with a migraine, the kind that feels like someone's drilling into your skull. I called in sick, took my medication, and went back to bed. When I woke up around noon, I felt human enough to make some toast and check emails. That's when I got a call from his office. "Hi, I'm trying to reach him about the Henderson proposal," said a woman I didn't recognize. "He's at work," I said automatically. A pause. "Oh, that's strange. He hasn't been in the office today." My stomach dropped. "Maybe he's working from home?" Another pause. "I don't think so. Let me transfer you to his supervisor." His supervisor came on the line and cleared his throat awkwardly. "I was hoping to talk to him actually. He hasn't been responding to emails today." "When did you last see him in the office?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. The silence on the other end stretched too long. Finally, "I'm probably not the right person to discuss this. I'll have HR call you." HR never called. Instead, I got a text from him around 5 p.m., saying he was heading home and asking if we needed anything from the store. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of quiet panic. I checked our bank accounts. His salary deposits had decreased slightly around 6 months ago, right after the supposed promotion. Not dramatically, just a few $100s less each month. When he walked through the door that evening, he had a grocery bag in one hand and his laptop bag in the other, just like any other day. He kissed me on the cheek and asked how I was feeling. "Better," I said. "How was work?" "Same old," he replied, putting groceries away. "That project is still causing headaches." I watched him carefully. There was nothing in his demeanor that suggested he was lying. He moved through our kitchen with the comfortable familiarity of our routine. This was the man I'd known for 8 years. The man who color-coded our spice rack, who scheduled car maintenance 3 weeks in advance, who kept a spreadsheet of our retirement plans. Yet something was very wrong. The next morning, I called in sick again. As soon as he left, I got in my car and followed him. It felt ridiculous, like something from a bad TV show. But what choice did I have? He didn't take his usual route toward the office. Instead, he drove to a small coffee shop downtown, one we'd never been to together. He went inside carrying his laptop bag. Through the window, I watched him sit down, open his laptop, and begin typing. I waited in my car for nearly an hour, then followed when he left. He drove to the library next, again with his laptop. Then lunch at a sandwich place. Then a park where he sat on a bench with his computer. My husband, who was supposed to be at a corporate office managing a team of 12 people, was wandering the city with a laptop. I followed him for 2 days. The pattern was always the same: coffee shops, libraries, parks, co-working spaces. Always with his laptop, always looking completely focused and professional. He was working, just not where he was supposed to be. Yesterday, I finally confronted him. I waited until after dinner, when we were both relaxed on the couch. "I know you haven't been going to your office," I said simply. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then just stared at me. "I followed you," I admitted. "After that call from your work. I know you've been going to coffee shops and libraries instead." He put his head in his hands. For a long moment he said nothing. When he looked up, his eyes were red. "I got laid off," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 6 months ago. The week before I told you about the promotion. I felt like I'd been slapped. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" "It was right after we talked about starting a family. Right after we calculated how much we needed to save. You were so excited about our future." He swallowed hard. "I couldn't bear to disappoint you. So instead you've been pretending to go to work. For 6 months. He nodded miserably. "I've been applying for jobs every day. I've had interviews, good ones. I've made it to final rounds. But nothing's come through. What about the money? We're still getting deposits. Severance for 3 months. Then unemployment. And I've been doing freelance work. That's what I'm actually doing on my laptop all day. I've made enough to cover most of the difference. I couldn't wrap my head around it. 6 months of leaving the house at 6:30 a.m. 6 months of work stories at dinner. 6 months of living a complete lie. Were you ever going to tell me? I asked. I kept thinking the next interview would be the one. That I'd come home with good news instead of. He gestured vaguely, this. We talked until 3 a.m. I learned that the company had gone through a restructuring. A fancy word for laying off 30% of the staff. His entire department was eliminated. He'd been given 3 months severance and glowing references. He showed me his job search spreadsheet, because of course he had won. Over 200 applications. 42 interviews. 6 final rounds. 0 offers. He showed me his freelance work. He'd built up enough clients to bring in about 60% of his former salary. Not enough to fully support us long-term, but enough to keep us afloat while he searched for something permanent. I've been networking, taking courses to strengthen my resume, doing everything right, he said. I just keep hearing we went with someone with more experience, or we decided to go in a different direction. The deception hurt. Deeply. But what hurt more was realizing that my husband had been carrying this burden alone for 6 months. Every morning, putting on a suit and tie to sit in a coffee shop. Every evening, making up stories about coworkers who no longer knew he existed. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. It wasn't about trust, he finally said. It was about shame. About failing. About not being the provider I promised to be. I'd always known he took pride in being reliable. I hadn't realized how much of his identity was wrapped up in it. I'm your wife, I said. We're supposed to handle these things together. I know, he whispered. I just kept thinking I could fix it before it became real. We've spent the past week figuring out what happens next. Financially, we're not in immediate danger. My job is secure, his freelance work is growing, and we have savings. The real damage is to the trust between us. I vacillate between anger and compassion. Between feeling betrayed and understanding the fear that drove him to this elaborate deception. Between wondering what else he might be hiding and recognizing the desperation behind his choices. He's agreed to therapy, both individual and couples. He's being painfully transparent about his job search now. Yesterday, he told his parents what happened, something he'd been dreading for months. The truth of where my husband goes every day isn't some sordid affair or secret addiction. It's to public places with free Wi-Fi where he can pretend his life hasn't fallen apart while desperately trying to put it back together. I don't know if I'm looking for advice or just needed to get this off my chest. How do you rebuild trust after something like this? How do you move forward knowing the person you share your life with could maintain such an elaborate deception? And yet, how do you not feel for someone who was so afraid of disappointing you that they created an entire fake life? I'm still processing everything. Sometimes I look at him working at our dining table. Now that he no longer needs to pretend, and I see the same man I've always loved. Other times, he feels like a stranger. I guess we'll see which feeling wins out in the end. Update *, wow. I didn't expect this post to get so much attention. Thank you all for your comments and support. A lot has happened in the last few days. After reading your comments, I realized many of you were right, that there might be more going on with him mentally than just fear of disappointing me. I sat him down and asked directly if he's been depressed. After some hesitation, he admitted he's been struggling but didn't want to add one more problem to our situation. That was the breaking point for me. Not in a bad way, but in the sense that I finally fully understood how much pressure he's put on himself to be perfect. We found a therapist who could see him immediately, and he had his first session yesterday. On the job front, there's been an unexpected development. A former colleague reached out to him about an opportunity at their company. It's not exactly what he was doing before, and it's a small step down in terms of responsibility, but it's in his field and the company is stable. He has an interview next week. We also sat down together and completely revised our budget and plans. I realized I've never really told him that I'd be okay with scaling back some of our life goals if it meant less pressure on him. When I said this, he looked so relieved it broke my heart a little. I don't know what the future holds for us, but for the first time in a week, I feel like we're facing it together instead of from opposite sides. The trust will take time to rebuild, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Thank you again for all your perspectives. This has been one of the hardest things we've faced as a couple, but I'm beginning to see how we might come out stronger on the other side.